Born Anna Eleanor Roosevelt in 1884 into the inner circle of New York society, her early life was marked not by privilege but by profound loneliness and tragedy. She was the niece of President Theodore Roosevelt, but this connection offered little comfort in a childhood quickly shadowed by loss. Her mother, the beautiful and socially demanding Anna Hall Roosevelt, often found her daughter plain and awkward, bestowing upon her the cruel nickname Granny and fostering a deep sense of insecurity. The warmth she craved came primarily from her father, Elliot Roosevelt, whom she adored, but his struggles with alcoholism led to his estrangement from the family. By the age of 10, Eleanor was an orphan. Her mother and younger brother died 2 years apart, followed shortly by her father. This triple tragedy left her in the care of her maternal grandmother, Mary Ludlow Hall, in a strict, somber household that further deepened her inherent shyness and sense of duty. The pivotal turning point in her youth occurred when she was sent to Allenswood Academy in England at the age of 15. Head mistress Marie Sylvestre provided the first truly supportive and intellectually stimulating environment Eleanor had ever known. Sylvestre saw beyond the reserved exterior, nurturing Eleanor's inquisitive mind and encouraging her to develop her own opinions and confidence. Allenswood was less a finishing school and more a crucible for independent thought, giving the young woman the intellectual tools and self-possession she would desperately need later in life. Her time there was a period of intense intellectual and personal blossoming. Returning to New York at 18, Eleanor made her required society debut, a process she found utterly suffocating. She preferred settlement work on the Lower East Side, encountering the poverty and suffering of immigrants, which sparked an early, genuine commitment to social reform, a concern that was highly unusual for a woman of her class. It was during this period that she began a quiet courtship with her distant cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Their engagement, initially opposed by Franklin's fiercely possessive mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, led to their marriage in 1905, with her uncle, President Theodore Roosevelt, giving the bride away. For Eleanor, marriage was hoped to be an escape from the isolation of her youth, but it quickly became clear that she was stepping into a household dominated by her imposing mother-in-law, where she was expected to be little more than a dutiful wife and mother to their eventually large family. The first decade of her marriage to Franklin Delano Roosevelt was defined by the demanding expectations of Sarah Delano Roosevelt, who held an iron grip on the family's domestic life. Eleanor found herself navigating the roles of wife, mother to 6 children, one died in infancy, and daughter-in-law within a suffocating environment at Hyde Park in New York. Lacking agency in her personal life, she began to find purpose outside the home, a commitment strengthened by Franklin's entry into politics. In 1910, Franklin was elected to the New York State Senate, moving the family to Albany, where Eleanor, although still reserved, began to observe the political landscape and develop a network of her own. A seismic shift in their marriage and Eleanor's independent identity occurred during World War I, after Franklin was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy in Washington, D.C. The societal expectation was that she would manage the household and social affairs. Instead, Eleanor immersed herself in war work, volunteering tirelessly with the American Red Cross and the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. This direct engagement with people from all walks of life, particularly working-class women and servicemen, shattered the barriers of her elite upbringing. For the first time, she was valued for her tireless effort and genuine empathy, rather than for her social position. The year 1918 brought a crisis that irrevocably altered the dynamic of her marriage. While unpacking Franklin's trunk, Eleanor discovered letters revealing his long-standing affair with her social secretary, Lucy Mercer. This betrayal was a profound personal trauma that led her to offer Franklin a divorce. However, Sarah Roosevelt intervened, threatening to disinherit Franklin, effectively forcing the couple to remain married for political and financial stability. Although they continued to live and work together, the relationship transitioned from a romantic partnership to a political and professional alliance. The discovery hardened Eleanor's resolve to build a meaningful life completely independent of her husband's affection. Following the war, Eleanor deepened her involvement with the Democratic Party's Women's Division and the League of Women Voters. She actively campaigned for women's suffrage and labor rights, forming powerful, lifelong friendships with female activists like Nancy Cook and Marion Dickerman. When Franklin was struck by polio in 1921, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down, Eleanor embraced a new critical role. She became his eyes and ears, traveling the state, speaking on his behalf, and maintaining his political connections during his rehabilitation. This necessity transformed her from a shy political spouse into a seasoned public figure and a formidable activist in her own right. Roosevelt was elected president in 1932, Eleanor Roosevelt transformed the role of First Lady from a ceremonial hostess into an activist platform. The Great Depression demanded urgent action, and Eleanor became the indispensable eyes and ears for her husband, traveling tirelessly across the country to witness the devastating effects of poverty firsthand. While Franklin managed policy from the White House, she visited coal mines, migrant camps, schools, and hospitals, often venturing into places no one in her position had ever dared to go. She then reported her findings directly back to FDR, providing raw, unfiltered accounts of the human cost of the Depression, which greatly influenced the formation and implementation of New Deal programs. Her most radical contributions were focused on marginalized groups. She championed the rights of women, ensuring they received fair representation and opportunities within government agencies. She held press conferences exclusively for female reporters, forcing news organizations to hire women just to cover the First Lady, and served as a powerful mentor and advocate for female political appointments. Her advocacy for African Americans was unprecedented for a First Lady. She publicly supported civil rights, famously resigning from the Daughters of the American Revolution, DAR, in 1939 after they refused to allow black contralto Marian Anderson to sing at their hall. She then helped arrange for Anderson to perform at the Lincoln Memorial, a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. Eleanor's progressive views and active political participation often drew fierce criticism from conservative media and politicians who felt she overstepped the boundaries of her traditional role. Undeterred, she used her national platform, including her daily newspaper column, My Day, to communicate directly with the American people, bypassing hostile newspapers and articulating her vision for a more just society. My Day became a vital link between the White House and ordinary Americans, addressing everything from social policy to her personal opinions. As World War II approached, Eleanor focused on humanitarian efforts, advocating for the displaced and refugees, and encouraging American women to fully participate in the war effort. Her personal evolution was now complete. The shy, insecure orphan had become one of the most powerful and influential women in the world, dedicated not just to supporting her husband's presidency, but to advancing a truly inclusive vision of American democracy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's death in April 1945 did not mark the end of Eleanor's public life. It marked its true beginning. Stripped of the title of First Lady, she was free to pursue a mission that extended beyond the United States. President Harry S. Truman, recognizing her unparalleled stature and global connections, appointed her as a delegate to the newly formed United Nations General Assembly in 1946. Many skeptics, including members of the U.S. delegation, assumed she would be a token appointment, sidelined to humanitarian or social issues. They were profoundly mistaken. Eleanor Roosevelt immediately proved herself a fierce, principled, and pragmatic diplomat. She became the driving force behind the most ambitious document in modern history, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. As chair of the UDHR drafting committee, she navigated intense ideological battles between delegates from nations across the globe, particularly between the Soviet bloc and the Western powers. She had to reconcile centuries of philosophical differences and varying legal traditions. At a time when women were rarely afforded a seat at the diplomatic table, she commanded respect through sheer persistence, clarity, and her deep moral authority. For 2 grueling years, she tirelessly defended the concept that human rights were universal, not just reserved for citizens of powerful states. She famously insisted on the inclusion of economic and social rights, such as the right to work and education, viewing them as essential foundations for political freedom. The UDHR was finally adopted by the General Assembly on December 10, 1948, without a single dissenting vote. It stands as her most enduring monument, a global moral compass that she helped forge from the ashes of war. Until her death in 1962, Eleanor Roosevelt remained the conscience of the Democratic Party and a relentless advocate for civil rights, continuing her column, My Day, and traveling the world as an unofficial ambassador. She was a woman who defined power not by the office she held, but by the moral force she exerted. A shy orphan who ultimately convinced the world that human rights belonged to everyone, everywhere. She truly became the First Lady of the world.
Eleanor Roosevelt's work did not cease with the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For the next decade and a half, until her death in 1962, she remained an active global citizen and a persistent voice for social justice, advising presidents and championing causes often neglected by the establishment. She continued to serve the Democratic Party as its conscience, especially on the critical issue of civil rights, frequently speaking out against segregation and meeting with leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy appointed her to chair the Presidential Commission on the Status of Women, a final, fitting act where she leveraged her monumental stature to fight for gender equality in her own country. When she died on November 7, 1962, the world mourned a figure who had grown from a hesitant, insecure orphan into perhaps the most respected woman of the 20th century. Her legacy is one of profound transformation. She fundamentally redefined the American political landscape, pushing her husband's administration toward a broader vision of welfare. She transformed the role of the First Lady from a mere social hostess to an agent of political and social change. And she transformed the global conversation, asserting that human rights were not a privilege reserved for the powerful, but a birthright for all. She once said, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home." It is in these small places, in the dignity she championed for every person, the poor, the marginalized, the woman fighting for a seat at the table, that her monument truly stands. Eleanor Roosevelt taught the world that true power lies not in authority or title, but in the moral courage to speak for those whose voices have been silenced. She was and forever will be the First Lady of the world.